So, just a show of hands, who wants to hear something about BNI from Peter today? Cool, so I've got more time. Awesome. So, today what I want to do is talk to you a little bit about how to create content that specifically addresses pain points for your customers before they ever bring them up with you. So there are three main areas that I'm going to cover today. It's going to be lots of erasing, so just, So, the first one is we're going to talk about the people that you know. Probably looks more like me than the rest of you, but we're going to talk about, we'll start with the people. So these are your customers. And there's lots of things that go into these customers, especially when you start thinking about what your customers have in common. So there's some questions that you could ask yourself specifically to identify or to make a short list really of what your ideal customer or your customer avatar should look like. So things like how old they are. Also, what gender they might be. So if you're in a business where a particular gender will buy from you more often than others, then that's something to consider, because if you're going to create content, you want to make sure that you're speaking to that person. There's nothing worse than creating content. It's a little bit like when you're doing your 30 seconds here. You want to stand up and really be specific with that. And one of the pieces of advice that we often get about our 30 seconds is not to use the words like, if you know anybody, if you know somebody, because that's too broad. So what we're trying to do here is really create a profile of somebody that you can kind of hang your hat on and say, I know with some level of confidence that this is the person that buys from me at the moment. So looking at things like age and gender. And then you also want to look at interests. So what kind of things do these people have in common? Are they common complaints? Are they the types of TV shows they watch? Is it the type of food that they eat or where they shop? There's all sorts of things that these people will have in common when they come to you. And this all comes from the conversations that you're having with your customers up front. What are you learning from them? What are you listening for when you're having conversations with them? And how much of it are you remembering later? When you walk away, how much of these things about each of your customers do you remember? Is it just a transaction to you, or are you trying to build relationships with your customers? Because the more relationships you build, the more you're going to learn about the people that you're selling to or that you're providing services to. So, for example, let's say that that we know that this person or that our ideal customer is between 25 and 50. And there's no specific gender because they're not a specific gender that always buys. And then let's use one of your businesses as an example. So, Jeremy, I'd like to know a little bit about your customers. Specifically, let's look at the people that do book restorations with you, for example. So, what are some of the common things or interests or observations you make about those customers?
They're retired.
Okay.
They are mainly female, and they have a very vested interest in passing their information on to their children or grandchildren.
And would you say that 25 to 50 window is accurate for yours? So what would you say they'd be?
I'd say 60 to 80.
Did you hear that noise in the room then? Yeah, it was that, oh. So, very quickly, just through a couple of questions with Jeremy, we were able to completely change the profile of the person that we might be creating content for or talking to, because these are some of the things that we know about them now. So all of you have the same opportunity. You all know the people that buy from you in different capacities. Now, some of you will have lots of specific products or services. Some of you will have one or two, or maybe only one. So depending on which part of your business you want to focus on, like we did with Jeremy then, we specifically looked at people that were looking to restore old books. So because Jeremy understands his customers, he can provide that kind of information. So what that means is that when it comes to this particular customer, that's something that we know about them, okay? So Jeremy, the next question I have for you is, now that we know a little bit about the I suppose the demographics of your customer, what are some of the common complaints or pain points that they have when they come to see you?
They don't know if their book can be fixed. They don't know whether it will last. They don't know how much it's going to cost, and they're probably the two main ones.
And do they have any questions around, the process? So, what you use, what it might look like when it's finished, how likely it is that you can restore it?
Certainly how likely it is. That's the first question they ask. There's probably a nervousness about what would happen, but not so much what we would do, but what can happen.
Right. So what Jeremy's identified for us as a marketing business, we're really looking at what those pain points are. So those things that Jeremy's highlighting there, these are really the things that matter, because this is where you're going to create your content to really speak to that audience. So if Jeremy wants to speak to more people that are looking to restore books, we start with the first lot, so their age, their gender, that kind of thing. And then the next part is addressing these pain points. So our ideal scenario with Jeremy to give him advice would be to say, speak to somebody like Adam, and we can work together to create content where you can address each of these pain points in a video, photography of the product itself, or creating social content either obviously for social media, for websites, to be able to send in an email. These are ways that you can address customer pain points before they've ever worried about it. And the best part about this is that you can share that information with people and they then catch onto it, or they latch onto it because they find it interesting, engaging. They learn something about that business or that process, and then that's when they decide to make a decision and use your services. And a lot of that happens without them ever speaking to you. They'll do all of that as part of their research. So if you wanted to learn more about this process, if you want to have a conversation about this specifically, book a one-to-one with me and we can chat more. Thanks very much.
When you've got this information, how do you then find the people to target? Where's that information come from?
Good question. So it depends on what you want to do. So for example, you can certainly create this kind of content and then use it in ads. So for example, if you were going to advertise on platforms like TikTok or LinkedIn or Facebook and Instagram, there's lots of super detailed, like you can get really granular. So to the point where, if for example, you wanted to target people that like the Metricon page, for example, then you could literally target people that like that page if they've got a big enough audience and then move them across to become fans of you and your work. So it depends on how granular you want to get, but you can use that specifically for ads. And when it comes to creating content just for your platforms, it's not really about targeting, it's about creating the kind of content that will appeal to your ideal customer so that when people see that content, they either use that or they then refer that or share it with somebody or tag them in that post so that they become aware of it.
Awesome. Guys, any more questions, please, if you'd like to